All right, we've got people trickling in here. We'll give everyone a couple of minutes. Obviously, everyone's probably coming off of meetings and such. Um, as we go through, and we'll go through this again when we get towards the kind of official start. But questions and such today, drop them into either the chat or the Q&A. If it's something that we can kind of easily answer, we'll go ahead and do so. Most likely at the end, we can kind of do a run through of everything. But for more technical questions that come up, we will probably actually look to note and reach out because we do want to give those questions the due they deserve and the time they deserve. So we're going to go ahead and probably reach out to schedule some time to review those as well. But we'll give everyone here a couple of minutes. Usually start probably at the five of here. So we'll throw an icebreaker out there. Ryan was thinking of this one earlier. It's what do you do day to day? Like what have you done in the last week that you just want to kind of share and chat about?
For me, well, most of my days are, I don't want to say stuck, that sounds too negative, but I have a 15-month-old, so we are entertaining new hobbies, which included last night gymnastics, which with a 15-month-old was more like a lot of other little kids, chaotic, running around, tumbling, and them trying to climb on things, which was actually very entertaining.
I mean, you've seen enough of my nieces and nephews to go through it to see yeah, either they immediately are into it and just, running around like crazy, or they're standing in the corner crying because they're in a new space that smells weird.
Well, she was the only child crying, and it was weird.
Oh,
But it was she got to it. It was fun. It's how my day was spent,
yeah.
or most of my days are spent.
I have the benefit at the moment of being the childless dog owner with my wife and I. So it's our dog has been not enjoying the rainstorms coming through. So we are handling that and her, kind of still jovial, but depression overall from there not being sunshine. So managing my dog's emotions.
Exactly. Well, how I see some people are still coming in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we can go ahead and probably get started now. Usually wait a couple of minutes, but people will trickle in as they do. They're coming off of
well,
meetings and such.
if you'd like, I know just for everyone, I kind of measured this because I like to leave a lot of room for Q&A or discussion, and everyone doesn't always enjoy when a call goes to the exact hour because you're coming right off meetings. So my goal is to give you a little bit of room, get coffee, a snack, or something after before this call ends. So Dom, if you want, you can wait 2 more minutes. Kind of up to you on you're the admin for this one. I'm just telling you how long of a session I have.
Yeah, no, I think we're kind of yeah, people are still coming in, but overall, I think we're okay to kind of get started. And there's
Perfect.
always the early introductions, and people can continue through there. So welcome everyone to this third installment in Openprise's AI webinar series. Um, my name is Dominic Fresky. Been at OpenPrice about a year now, longtime customer though, and very happy and excited to kind of be here with Ryan to be going through, kind of that continuation of our exploration of AI really in the enterprise setting. I'm going to hit the next slide here. So today we're really here to talk about neural networks and Bayesian modeling. So if you've got at least a master's in linear algebra, you should be set. But never mind. Sorry. We're actually going to be talking about hallucinations and really how to manage them. And as we go through what AI is capable of, obviously this is a big topical point, and so we wanted to give you the strategies that really align to what we've shown in our last webinar. If you want to hit the next slide, which is our the critical functions tied to this kind of AI orchestration platform. So you heard me speak on this last time going through the 6 different pieces here. We focused on a couple. And during that session, I called out that our next session, this one here, is going to be focusing on hallucination management, given how imperative of an obstacle this is to tackle. So to go through that, I have invited Ryan Nelson here to give a breakdown on the strategies tied to this AI orchestration platform. So I'll hand it over.
Awesome. Thank you, Dom. So I will warn everyone, I had not before this got so in depth on trying to create AI images. It was quite funny. I kind of got my own hallucination experience on doing these, but I did a lot of AI images. It was entertaining to me. My goal of covering this today is going to be inspiration, hopefully trigger some thoughts for you guys on how this may fit into existing projects you're doing or how you may want to look to fit some of this management, no matter how you're approaching it, what systems in your use of AI. Because I don't think hallucinations going anywhere, the failure to deliver, and then as things get more and more, I'll touch on some topics where it's gonna get harder and harder to maybe find and or even control the fact that things will have bias. So what we'll go over, I'm going to kind of focus on the what. We're going to talk about validation, remediation, why it's important to measure, the why, like kind of why bother? Why even bother to track this? Well, if this was humans doing the work, you would do the same tracking, right? If it was your employee or it was your own work, you knew your boss was going to ask you, you would want to make sure that you have accurate, reliable, and a level of trust in this work. And I think it's really important with AI, where we're getting thrown so many projects that if the same time when you've done routing or scoring and a different team goes, I don't trust this, they don't use it. You have that same risk here with AI. It just can fail faster, which is a great thing to be totally honest. But we just want to make sure we're building this on like a building block where your project has a chance to have success, or you could fail quickly and realize it doesn't. We're going to touch on kind of how, which is going to fall into a couple categories I'll hit on later, but talking about real-time quality checks, using maybe AI to check AI, where there's continuous feedback loops, whether it's from AI, people, your end user, even as the ops person in the middle, or no matter what your role is here, you may have kind of assigning this to others. You may be the one doing it. I doubt this because we're kind of ops driven here, but if there's someone on the recipient end of what AI is doing, like as in what you're actually going to read and take action on, you kind of could fall on multiple ends of the spectrum. But the goal here is think of like I want to kind of be supervision for AI, making sure what it's doing. The goal being it's probably never going to be perfect. And I say probably I don't like to be so definitive. The goal is to be trustworthy, right? If I could trust an employee, in this case, I'm going to treat AI like my employee. I want to trust it. I want to catch though when it's making different mix-ups that could be to detriment. So why was this even a topic in that top 6 that you got to hear in other webinars when Dom covered is what we're seeing, and this is a 2025 report from Iconic, but hallucination is the number one challenge. But what I like to highlight too is explainability and trust. To me, those go very much hand in hand. It's like I mentioned, if you don't trust the outcome, whether you human built the project or AI built the project, people don't really use it. And I see that in my day to day. I see it in when I speak with customers and prospects. It's if you doubt it, you're probably not going to use it, or your end user is not going to use it. And it's just not going to get that same impact. This has been happening for probably all of us that are operators in this call, that even the smallest thing can erode a very big kind of project to go like, oh, I should have just waited to launch that, for example. So even though it is technically wrong sometimes, it's also very creatively confident. I've had so many cases personally where if you just read it word for word and not take into consideration what you asked it to do or what it was given, where you're like, huh, that sounds right. Frankly, at times my wife has said that I am kind of that person where I say things so confidently when she asks me something about why something works the way it does. Not technology. We're just talking being at home. She's like, you're probably wrong. And we search it and I'm terribly wrong, but very confident about it. And in this case, AI can do a lot of the same because it wants to give you an answer. We're going to focus on 4 key areas. There's a lot of different projects that may fall in these categories for you guys, but it's really a bit of opinion. I will tell this. I don't think that I didn't approach this in a way as like, this is the definitive way you must follow this. I don't really like that. Like I mentioned, I want to inspire. I want to talk about what I see. And there's some areas for a human to check AI. Frankly, I think for the articles I read from different partners we have and different experts, that human check AI may be at the end of every one of these, frankly, depending on if you're the person whose name is stamping the outcome of that AI, you probably want to check it. Just at what scale? I'll give you some examples about that. We'll talk about using non-AI to check AI. Kind of, you don't always need the shiniest new tool. Even if AI can check itself, like the next one, use AI to judge itself. And then the last one we'll kind of go into is there a reason for different models to check one AI model, so AI2 against AI1? Dom, I did see, so I don't actually see a lot of the questions come up. So I did see, is that a question?
Yeah, I'm posing a question out there to kind of get people thinking during this discussion, right? Is we're going through how, and so to kind of apply to what hallucinations have you encountered, and to think about how this could really be applied based on the initiatives that people were going through. Because I always find that to be one of the more effective ways to go through these kinds of conversations and presentations, right? Is to say, cool, how could I have applied this, or how would this help me? Or even raise your hand and say, I have an idea or a concept. We'd love to hear it too. So if you have anything like that, go ahead and drop it in the chat, and I'll be participating there. And if there's any questions that come up, I'll definitely kind of interject and
Mhm.
raise the question to you.
I will give someone bonus points because I'll say it was a challenge for me to find something that I felt inspired from the ops lens for using two different AI models to judge each other. So if anyone has a great example of that, that is one I would love to hear because I was challenged to find one where I really felt it was necessary or if I was forcing it. So kind of because the way AI is evolving and its newness in our different roles, I'd love to hear if someone has some inspiration on that.
Yeah.
So you guys can probably see this little picture back here, this painting. Hopefully I'm pointing over the right shoulder. I can see myself on the screen. I picked this one out. It's not my dog, but it falling in that same thing where I mentioned it wants to answer. It's like my dog doing tricks. At the end of the night, when we put for those of you here, I have a 15-month-old. The new thing is that she gets to give them a treat. The way this dog's jumping around, which looks coincidentally like one of my dogs, is the exact thing he does every night to figure out what he needs to do to make her give him a treat. In the same way, like I've heard someone say puppy dog syndrome for AI, and maybe it's a little overemphasizing, but if you're not giving it the right direction or giving it room to be like not give you an answer, which doesn't always solve hallucinations, it desperately wants to answer. It wants to give you something that is clear. And much like my dog will do every trick in the book, but really it doesn't matter. My 15-month-old doesn't care. It's part of just she just wants to give him a treat, but he is jumping around. He's enthusiastic, he's confident. You're unsure what he knows he's doing. I feel like AI is a bit the same way in the way I've been using it. Um, in personal projects, inside stuff for my customers and prospects, where it's hard to tell sometimes when it's wrong. And that's what I hope to hit on a couple of these where certain projects you can tell, like, hey, that's not what I asked you to do, or where did this value even come from? So let's talk about one for humans to check AI. Couldn't find a better way. I was going to say employees or we check the work, but a good example I wanted to put here was like an account brief. This is a lot of like aggregating of information, which we tend to already do in a lot of our systems. AI can create an incredible account brief. I think it's still worth looking at and going, did it make anything up? Did it overemphasize? But like, I think there's a case for letting AI do the heavy lifting. It has you get it connected to the right systems through a right AI orchestration approach. It has the company background. It has the open deals, the engagement themes, the real metrics from your CRM. List can go on and on depending on the approach you're taking. It's going to be fast. It's going to be consistent or pretty consistent, right? We're talking about hallucinations. And ideally, it won't forget a field, but who knows? It may fill something in on these prompts. Like I've seen the oddities of it misreading a field, misformatting, or even kind of assuming, which is a bit of a hallucination, like you'll see in a later example. But AI doesn't always know it's wrong, so I think this is where a human can come in. Sometimes this could be a project where you say, hey, we never had account briefs, so it being wrong 10 or 20% of the time is a perfect project. We don't mind. That human intervention, only helps a certain percentage, hey, we don't want it. I think it fits in here because say you already had account briefs and there's the things you're creating that took hours of time, you have the same risk of human error. Let's complement what the AI is doing. Let it take on the speed and consistency. Let the human check, create reports, and do that check that comes in and tries to find the scribbling nonsense. Typically, it's not that bad. But the human does the sanity check to make sure it's useful when it's dropping on the desk of that end user. So in this example is as if it did its own account brief. This is like a snapshot of it pulling together this information, whether it's a custom object or exactly how you want to pull this together. You have options here. The idea was I wanted to show kind of what it read. It read from these different objects, brought it all into one view, not something where a rep or whoever the end user is having to click around. It's quickly pulling these metrics, stitching it all together, creating something that looks polished. But in this case, I don't think you just accept it. I think it's on a user, the ops person, or as I talked about, continuous feedback loop. Depending on how you work within your org, maybe you have the end user be the feedback so that ops person fines tunes it scales. It's not just a one-to-one adjustment. But this shows up under like your action. The reason I say to have someone review it is typically that end user doesn't care who wrote it. They don't care if AI wrote it, that you wrote it. I think the mindset is pretty simple. They just care whether it's right or wrong and how it could be misleading.
Mhm.
In this case, having AI get you that 80 to 90% of the way there, this could be a really good project. Other projects like this, reading a lot of data, aggregating it to kind of a decision set, these aren't ones where it's easy to go, where did this value come from? But in this case, in this example, I think there is. I can't per se quickly use where did the value come from for this summary, but what I do think falls into the inconsistencies goes into creating simple reports to check the metrics the AI put. That was all parsed out and through these steps. So if AI said this information, you can see it could be a detriment, right? It's a very simplistic example, but if I had a report that a human looked at quickly to check that account brief that says, hey, this employee count's off. If you're putting this in front of a rep, they may start to question why I was even routed to them, right? Because based on the company size, employee count, or just simple formatting that I found in my ops experience and world, it kind of just degrades confidence. Like people tend, the smallest things, like I mentioned, can erode what people believe is a good idea. When it comes to the human checks, what I think is important is there's going to be human check scenarios where it's worth you having to sit down and read. But ideally, this is replacing where you were taking hours and you're taking minutes and going, yep, good. Like kind of like that stamp of approval.
It's kind of a continuation of how AIs were originally trained, right? It's literally taking the outputs of these learning models and saying, is this good? Is this bad? Kind of communicating that back into however you're writing the prompt and readdressing, what you're
Mhm.
asking it to do. And so, yeah, it's kind of a continuation of that um, through these
Absolutely.
procedures.
Some of my, I would say, favorite ones, but of course, it has to fit in the right organization, is when you have end users that are willing to receive stuff and give feedback. Because oftentimes it doesn't really scale to have an ops person have to stamp every account brief going out. But if you have end users, and this is where different, not trying to find AI projects, but fitting AI into existing projects that have value, you tend to get buy-in from the end user. They would be willing to go, yeah, there was this oddity. Yeah, there was this oddity. Hopefully, a 10 to 20% hallucination, not huge amount, allowing rather the individuals that are likely on this call to do the scalable approach, make these changes to their prompts, adjust the data that's being fed, and in turn make changes at a broad scale, not these micro scales. But for the example, I did want to highlight it this way that some cases you could just create a simple report where it had the parsed AI stuff and what it has. Yep, did a good job and check some percentage of your data. Before I move on to this one, I don't actually see with the way I have my two screens set up. I don't know if we've had any questions, but
No questions
okay,
yet, but
perfect.
do invite people, if there's any specific, methodologies or any kind of question you have about the hallucinations themselves and such, please do drop them into the chat here and we can discuss as they come up.
So the next one, as I said, like use earlier, I said use non-AI to check AI. To me, I view this as automation. And I, in my daily life, don't do this one because I like to go buy the nice new tool and use the nice new tool. I go to the hardware store way too often. But I could say this from a work related, not everything needs another model or another prompt. The description I'm about to give very likely could be a comparison. The same story I could have said for have AI check AI. But sometimes that's not cost effective, if depending on the viewpoint you're taking, or just not like maybe not the best choice because we're talking about hallucinations. Sometimes using something like automation, using deterministic rules is the key. Using AI to pull structure out of chaos of unstructured data of out of office emails and email signatures that could have different formats and different long message threads. Great. That is a great thing to do because I've had so many times before AI trying to parse those out, return Google searches, parse them out, and it's not simple because they have different formats. And I'm sure some of you have found better ways to do it, but that's where AI is going to fit well. Well, the automation can do a good job once AI has done its task and start to look at things as like, do I have to ask AI, hey, did you grab the right stuff? No, get AI to generate the answer. Use automation where you can to check the details. The human in this one is still, we are the output, right? Maybe it still falls in my world where if you're handing this through, you would QA it in the same way that when you had a junior employee reported to you, depending on different work you've done, there was a QA structure before it landed on your VP's desk. So there's confidence in this case. I view these a lot like that same structure because at the end of the day, we're going to look good when AI does good. But I think when it does bad, we're not going to be unscathed. And that's where you'll notice a lot of what I lean into here is check as you move and utilize the right tools and try to build the most confidence.
So
So,
while the last one was a lot of post kind of production review manually, this one is really, I think, attributing both the first and second concerns, right? Because if you are including these kind of automated deterministic rules through things
mhm.
in flight, the output, as an operator, you're going to trust a lot more because you know that you've saved time on what it's producing, but also in flight, trust that when it lands, you've done what you can.
Yeah, you try to automate some of the quality checks or the different checks based on the project as much as you can. So in this example, I'm going to utilize a out of office email, which of course I wrote one that seems simple. That's not actually the point here because these tend to be drastically different. Even when I have long out of office, I like to write funny messages. I don't think anyone cares, but I like to do it anyways. It's not all so simple as this is the person, if urgent, or my coverage, or so forth. AI does a pretty good job at capturing this, where what's important is right here. And the context of the message is pretty important. Some of us put different subject lines and so forth. But in action, this is what I'm looking to capture, knowing this is an out of office email. And maybe this is the case, this is going to go outside of hallucination. The case is getting this unstructured data, taking this in and going, hey, is Parker Lee in our database? Because maybe he should be. And that's for more ops to take action. I won't take you guys down that world. But this is what I want it to parse. And it doesn't take a 50-step prompt to do so. Now, this is just a simple prompt. Obviously, prompts could be different. In this case, just asking it to parse specific information, telling it not to guess, and giving it the detail of that out-of-office email response. Now, when we start to talk about how can I check this and where could this go wrong, and kind of a human again could check these, right? I mentioned like anywhere automation could be used, AI could be used, but like humans could be all part of this. But we're looking at efficiency, we're looking at confidence. You guys are being asked to do more with less or the same, right? Just throw in some AI in there. This one's pretty simple though. And you could think of this in any other unstructured data format where I'm asking it to take something out that's present in that unstructured data. We want it to pull that delegate's email out. I view two ways this can go wrong, but there's probably even more. The two that come to mind for me, but this one's just because there's one email at the top, the sender, and then the delegate. Obviously, there's something in the signature that can play out and bring in some little creativity here too. But One thing is if it does a failure to perform task. So what do I mean by that? If it comes back and says, oh, Ryan Nelson is the coverage email. Well, that email is present. So if I was to search that, and I'll show you in this next one, it would be present. So I wouldn't be able to immediately identify it's wrong, but that one's more for a failure to listen, failure to perform task, and sometimes can be adjusted via the prompt. And just checking, because this is more of an ask to say, give me something that I believe is present in this unstructured text. The second method that falls more on that hallucination experience we're having is it literally making something up. For example, it comes in and says it's Ryan Parker at openprizetech.com. That's a problem. That doesn't exist in here. It completely made that up. It's not in the sender. It's not in what was parsed. It's what it did parse, but where did that come from? This is going to make, like, we want to make sure we can use automation to make simple checks because it's more of a contains. Does the asset I give it, the information I gave it, contain what it returned? Those don't always work so simply as like, yeah, it's great. Because you may look at this and go, ooh, Ryan, what if they didn't put an email and they just said Parker Lee? And we know the framework for Openprise is first name, last name at openprizetech.com. Now, we're not going that hallucination route. We're going to start going down that route of could you use AI and pattern recognition to create different email addresses, kind of cool projects. If you went down that route, you may still get into can I use automation to double check the pattern recognition it did? Does it fit? Did it use the first name and the last name to see if it was present? So, what do I kind of mean by that when I'm saying, is it present? It's very simple. Think of this like we call it an infer. Think of it like a VLOOKUP. I have the email response. It parsed that coverage email. Does the input value, the email response, contain that coverage email? It's really a simple yes or no. If yes, we're on the right track. Does it contain the coverage name? If yes, we're on the right track. Now, that alone, because the way emails tend to be structured, doesn't really save me because that could have been the sender's information. This is a simplified example, but doing additional checks, like tell me that sender's email or that sender's name, does that match the coverage email it returned? If yes, now that's bad. Now maybe we're filtering these into something that is the more common practice, common like human intervention or no human intervention, things like that. Most any for this one will fall into a realm where the goal is to identify, in my opinion, gray areas because we would hope it's getting around like 80% benefit as you fine tune your prompt, even 90% or more. But can I check what I asked it to do? This isn't, hey, read that email and give me the context. That's different. That's harder. This is saying pull out something from calendar invites, pull out something from email signatures, any of this open text where you're actually saying, give me something that is present. You can do simple checks like this where you don't have to go and recreate the wheel and ask the prompt to do it itself, in turn being maybe more cost effective when we're talking at really, really large scale. And frankly, a really definitive, like, I think you made this up. I want to have a human intervene, adjust it, and or like not accept that change.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hit on a couple ones where it's a little bit of education, but I don't like to do it too much. So this one has to do with overfitting. I don't know if it's something everyone's heard, but this one I thought was kind of interesting because I said I played with my AI photos and you start to think about what was an AI model actually trained on? I made this very specific, not to be something that's so serious into our ops, whether it's a coding model or everything else. But AI models learn from a massive amount of training data. And it does risk some level of overfitting. Where if I started to think about if I was training a model and I was sending a bunch of pictures of dogs that are always on the lawn and a bunch of pictures of cats that are always on couches, it sees the big picture, not the fact that I'm saying, look at this cute dog or look at this fuzzy little cat who's also cute. I'm a dog person, but it may see the big picture and see this couch. So it didn't learn that cat is this small little furry thing with pointy ears that sometimes isn't super friendly because they're not as cool as a dog. But it may actually associate animals sitting on furniture equal cats. right? Then all of a sudden, if that's how your model's behaving or like kind of what you're engaging, you can, it's like more the idea of this is to identify trends if there's a flaw it's leading to. If I threw a dog on a couch, it's a cat. If I threw a raccoon on a couch, it's a cat. Now I'd hope it would catch a human, but you throw like your VP of sales on a couch, it's a big stressed out cat, right? It's simplified example, but when you think about how these models learn, is they do see the big picture, not
Mhm.
compared to what we're maybe looking at and going, well, that's obviously a dog, and I don't understand how it doesn't get it. It will even, because it's based on these patterns, maybe though it's the wrong pattern, it's overfitting, it's going to sound rational. It's going to have an explanation of why it thinks it's a cat. And these are things you can begin to look out for, but it's worth noting that it's kind of a good example of why validation, the guardrails, and the checks and things I mentioned are kind of necessary, even more so. And I'll say I haven't been so deep in AI for years to say, oh, my projects went from successful to not being successful. But I hear other experts out there talking about it where there is a chance, like you upgrade to the next model or even just the same one, the behavior of asking certain prompts can begin to shift the outcome you're receiving. It'd be a lie to say I'm the expert to tell you like, oh, it's going to shift at this percentage. And like I said, I'm not a like I speculate, but I don't say definitive. Um, this is a good example though, where whether it's learning from you or others, sometimes patterns it remembers, even if it's the wrong one, and you'll start, it's worth checking your projects. The next one, I promise, then we'll get into some more use cases, is the countermeasures. Cloudflare is probably not the only one now. This is a bit old, but the idea that some systems like Cloudflare are actually intentionally feeding AI to get it to go away, misleading information. Now AI is going out, hitting things off Cloudflare and actually getting wrong information intentionally, not that it wants it, but it's getting fed it like, oh, this is what you're looking for. We can imagine over time if other systems, it's not the worst idea, depending on how your business functions, on the impact of how AI can scrape and hit all these systems, how this can impact what it's giving, and maybe how that's a pass through to us and what we receive, where it's wrong to us as humans reading it, or just it's wrong, like this is seems totally made up. And then the next one is one where like this is, I did say I kind of avoid speculation, but it is something I'm seeing as I read and dig into stuff. And I don't know how far this has gone yet. I'm not a out here reading research studies and that level of intentness on this, but is bias amplification per proprietary data. Now, this could mean things like the Reddit, the Substack, different things where these models, whether like the big names, it actually didn't let me put their names on there. That's not compliant with image creation in AI. I couldn't put the big names on there, so that's why they're model A, 3, and B. That's a little hallucination. It would not listen to me when I was like A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3. But in this case, you imagine when data starts siloing by intent, not by our control. But these different models, these different businesses have proprietary data that's theirs, or these different licensing agreements that make it to where they're the only one with that information, where others aren't able to go crawl that information. This siloed data is going to make some of these models not have a full picture, or only certain models have certain things. In turn, kind of creating a bias of sorts, and bias may be the wrong word, but like, is it hallucinating if it doesn't even know? Because it wasn't aware of all this other information because only this other model has access to it. I think Dom, talking to you, you had an example on this. Was it Yelp or something else of
Well,
the
it's the concept of, we've seen that obviously with most online services, truthfully, where you kind of get the negative bias built into something like Yelp, right? You're going to get the extreme emotion. So my analogy for it or metaphor, whatever you want to call it, is if you look at Yelp, right, you're going to get those that either had an amazing experience or had the worst experience of their lives, or people who just really want to be negative on stuff. You're going to miss out on a true segment of data, which is people who went to that place and had a nice time, who didn't feel that imperative need to go through and write something. So similarly, if you're missing a source of data, all you're going to get is, the universe that the AIs are going to be trained on and see is based on a subset of the entirety of data. And as sites and, social networks and all these really do kind of put their walls up more, you're going to see more and more, as you said, this kind of bias amplification in that if whoever gets Reddit, they're going to have all of Reddit to be able to go through. Whether or not that's a good source is a whole other thing. Ask Google about glue on pizza. But ultimately, it's going to be that they're going to have that single source of data, or whoever gets Stack Overflow or those kinds of things. So it's something to kind of always keep in mind when it comes to these what it's producing. And so yeah, that's definitely something that we've talked about internally too. Is just how do we try to circumvent that when we run into these issues.
I can't be the only one, Dom, because this is a conversation that has to wonder why you just said glue on pizza.
So I had to drop that in there. I was hoping to see if I got any questions on that. Gemini, early Gemini, when it first came out from Google, I believe they called it Bard back then. Um, Someone had asked the question of what are good toppings for pizza, and it suggested glue. And it was because there was a joke thread in Reddit that basically, well, probably memed to the point on Reddit where people were responding to it, and it just became a trusted source. So glue on pizza is one of my favorite examples of just outright hallucination but not really hallucination because it pulled from what it knows, but it produced the wrong result.
Interesting. Yeah, that is maybe a human intervention example, not I don't know if it's on the list. So now jumping back in, I try to avoid the education part of this is using AI to judge itself. Now, as I mentioned before, some of these examples could overlap. You're like, I could have did human, I could have did automation, I could use AI and AI. Like, there's some flexibility here, but sometimes just asking it to judge itself can save you a bit of time. So using this same kind of account brief or having it normalize fields, whether it's industry, job title, region, company size, just make a nice long list. Instead of just taking it at face value, you can immediately ask that same model, I'm oversimplifying it, but how confident are you in this? Or run this again, and then you can double check the outcome. I see a lot of behavior like this when I'm sure some of the people on the call deal with data enrichment, where they're like, this vendor, I don't trust their data. And they're like, well, okay, I'll call another vendor. Well, in this case, think of it like not the AI, two different models, but maybe you just have it try it once, try it a second time. Majority rules, right? Hey, they look the same. I'm pretty confident. Or you can get a little layered. You can say, ask it to check itself. And if it's confident, you start to think about how it can put it into stacks, right? Instead of that human intervention where I was describing that you have to look at every single one of them or beg the salesperson to be willing to give you a feedback loop, maybe when you start letting it subset, I will admit there's probably still margin of error for this. I'm not so definitive that this will work perfectly, but I've seen customers utilize this in a pretty good way where projects that don't need 100% accuracy, they're okay with some sneaking into that confident world where they're coming through and the detriment isn't bad. But asking it to sort, let it actually flag its uncertainty. If you're ready for it, you can ask it to show its evidence, ask it if it's doing stuff on data being missing. Now, I don't mean this as prompt. I mean prompt and context engineering, prompt engineering, giving it the appropriate message to make it question itself to try again. And so we're seeing some success in this to where maybe you're getting better cases of there is a high confidence. Maybe that auto approves, maybe it just does whatever automation, so forth, your goal is. But designating as a low confidence, hopefully a much smaller stack, is coming in landing for the human to review or an intern. Or, I mean, frankly, it's like I'm hoping when these really get running, not to belittle an intern, I was one of those once, is some of these projects that used to take highly intelligent, highly experienced, highly technical people, not to minimize, but can end up on the plates of people that don't have to have already had that experience, where individuals with that level of experience and skill set are out doing the next big thing, implementing the next big project, not spot checking potential oddities and issues. So in this case, using one AI to kind of make itself a little bit less of a black box, You did see explainability and trust being that second flaw on that chart I showed a long time ago. This doesn't blindly make that still not an issue, but asking it to explain how it got to that. Ideally, you gaining a little bit more trust and understanding some of its reasoning. And instead of having to check every single record, checking some of it. And I highly recommend, though, you still keep feedback loops here. Something got tagged as high confident and it went through, and someone gets that, and it's like, turns out it was wrong. Let's keep a record of those. Just like you would if this was a human running all these projects, keeping a record, adjusting, correcting, and making the changes. So this is the one where I really hoped that someone would have some inspiration by the end of this because I was not I came up with ideas and it really felt like I was forcing it. I like to be transparent. And I was like, well, I could have just used the same example I just had and been like, well, have one model check model two. That just seemed cost inefficient and unnecessary. So I do have an example, I promise, but I'll admit slightly out of my wheelhouse because I didn't really come up with one I thought was really good for ops at the moment that justified the use of Model 1 versus Model 2. Unless we're talking, right? Maybe that enrichment example I just kind of shared ad hoc there. If you really kind of are concerned or you have Model 1 and Model 2 out doing web search, like that grounded
Mhm.
search, maybe there's some plays in there. But I put this one on here because fortunately AI doesn't really function like this. They're typically, like in my experience, they're not fighting with each other. I honestly I don't even know they're always aware of each other in this case, but with humans, this would absolutely be a real problem. In this case, the idea is to be their coach, making sure they understand. And when I do have the example of Model One's purpose versus Models Two purpose, and they understand where one starts and the other begins and how their work complements one another, as if you were coaching two employees that want to be successful and are highly stressful, or they're highly stressful to you. They're probably also stressed, but in this case, AI doesn't tend to yell at you, at least so far. Maybe the outcome of it, you get in trouble with if you didn't check your work at times.
So very much like training your dog.
Oh,
It's always going to be happy with you, but you might be frustrated.
I don't know. If he doesn't get his dental treat from the baby, he squeaks and doesn't let us sleep. So it just
True.
depends. So the example I decided to go with is one that after talking actually to my dev team, because Transparent was actually looking at the fact of coding. There are models that are really good at writing code. Now, arguably, if you have some coders on this call, you would tell me you're completely wrong, and that's okay. Maybe I am. I'm going with a little bit of trust here in people, as if, but not AI. Trust in coders on my organization is that you have a model who's creative. It's fast. It's great at generating that functional logic. But just like any other builder, and this commentary I've heard, it's not always perfect. Maybe the second model is trained more for auditing. It's less creative, a lot more skeptical. It checks syntax, checks the logic, tests the logic, flags any inconsistencies, the inefficiencies. And obviously, I could list off a bunch more words of technical coding, but it has these very not contradictory, but like complementative approach.
Yeah.
End game is not passing through one like one's any better, but like purpose built and purpose built, orchestrated for an ideal outcome.
Yeah. It's funny enough, I was actually at a conference 2 months ago where some of I think the CTO and some of the other kind of developers for Claude were there for Anthropic. And he was talking about how many different models that they will use in this fashion, right? To say, I'm writing through this code, either this is really good at generating this type or this specific subset, and I use this to grade it and evaluate it and do the bug reporting and troubleshooting. So, this seems to be one that, well, probably a little cost prohibitive. I'm going to assume their budget for using their own AI is probably a little different. Can definitely be effective depending on what type of kind of creation you're doing.
Oh, I'm sure I've seen this happen firsthand for people I know having fun side projects running off, and rather than paying their engineers lots of money, they were able to test something in theory. I believe whether it falls into ops, if anyone's popped up with one in chat, um, it kind of goes back to what I said in the very beginning is like potentially using the right tool for the like have the right tool for the job. You don't follow my rule of always buying the shiny new tool. Even though I like to, and like have it with intention, orchestrating these, making the intention is like not model chaos. Yes, you're gonna have to like kind of plug and play and adjust what model's best for what and test different outcomes. I kind of see this as something that will be iterative as it continues. And the goal is just getting something that you can actually trust. Now, the one thing not to leave you with, but like the idea is I covered a couple different examples. The goal here, as much as I'd love it to be perfection, the goal is, in my opinion, higher confidence in the output you're receiving for the projects you're using AI. It's oftentimes trying to gain efficiency, accuracy, just getting things in a place where like you would be willing to hand that through to your biggest boss and go, yep, look what happened. Now, I covered a couple different methods. I'm sure there's even more out there. Is no single method's probably going to bulletproof this because hallucination doesn't appear to be going away. It's based on the glue on pizza thing. It could just still be learning more things that aren't a hallucination, just it's being misled, or the Cloudflare example. But every one of these have some blind spots. You can begin to try to layer to kind of take these approaches and begin to fill the holes. One catches what the other misses. Oftentimes we saw the same principle pre-AI for things like security and code review and even more perspectives to kind of fewer gaps that can remain. What I'd like to highlight though is there you got to keep in mind a balance, especially if you're someone in the role that attended this call or even as you talk to your leadership is if that stack gets too tall, you may get into this same realm of something that's really, really slow, unnecessarily complex, and you're kind of in this place where you're like, wow, we're at the same place. I just do more with it. I think the real art is in finding the right balance and finding enough coverage to say, like, this project can be successful, even if it has this small level of questionable confidence. So that don't create a scenario where right now some people may be buried in their own process and different things they've created. With AI, you could get buried in 10 times as much process and really stress yourself out. So the goal here is to find the right balance.
And that's truthfully, I think, where we have found kind of the most success as we've talked to customers and such, right? Is using really a combination of all of these, either in how they are kind of starting a net new initiative based on AI or integrating AI into an existing workflow or system to then kind of fit it in to help with pieces of the work, but then to continue some of the either automation or the human work, or using, say, like our internal LLM to evaluate what they got from ChatGPT or something,
Mhm.
depending on what's the most cost effective. So definitely seen this kind of apply in that Swiss cheese model really across the board to be the most effective so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dom, do we have, I know webinars aren't where people tend to want to talk a lot in all your meetings.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions or anyone have an inspiration of one model versus another?
Yeah, have you pitted any against each other just to see how? I know I saw early days, especially with the voice models, that folks would have them talk back and forth a little bit. Has anyone done that with any projects though, where they've kind of had that model one, model two, either competition or complementary work? I think we have a quiet bunch today.
Oh, it is okay. I believe that by joining this, you can likely, or we could follow up so you have
Yeah.
access to Dominic and I if you have any questions, or even if you have a much more technical question, happy to set up, if you reach out, or we'll reach out to you to share this, set up time to discuss where maybe you have some interesting hallucination management or even an interesting hallucination riddle to solve.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll be sending out a follow-up email from today. Of course, we'll have the recording posted on our website shortly. If you want the slides or any kind of information from them, please do reach out. Be happy to kind of help out and provide whatever we can. As we kind of, I think, wind down here today, do visit the openprizetech.com site. We've got a bunch of information there about not only AI in general and kind of thought leadership pieces and solutions pieces, but also, how we are building alongside AI. So if you have any interest to kind of go in depth on those solutions, information is posted there. Again, you can always reach out to us on LinkedIn as well. We're always willing to have conversations to really understand kind of how you're using AI today, how you're handling what we know is to be the biggest issue people are really encountering with this, which is that trust and reliability based on particularly it hallucinating. Um, so with that, and I think with no questions here so far, I think we can go ahead and end today's call. Thank you everyone for hopping on. Thank you, Ryan, for going through those examples and those strategies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with that, we will catch you on the next one. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.